In this video, I wanted to see if I could beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Violet using only boss Pokemon. To keep it simple, every time I beat a boss, be that Titan, Gym Leader, or Team Star boss, I'll be randomly receiving one of the Pokemon from the boss I just beat. I'll also be attempting to beat this challenge with a hardcore Nuzlocke rule set. Under my hardcore Nuzlocke rules, if a Pokemon faints, it's considered dead and must be released. I also don't allow setup moves, nor do I allow EV training. The rest of the rules to this run can be seen on screen now and in the description. With the basic rules out the way, let's jump right into this run and see if we've got what it takes to secure a victory. So I put on my stupid looking hat and then it's time to pick our starter. I've decided that using one of the overpowered starters would kind of go against the spirit of this run, so I'm going to use Susan the Fuecoco to get us past our first gym leader and earn us our first boss Pokemon, but after that should be going to a farm up state. That means I just have to get through the overly long intro to this game, and then we can start this run for the real. So first off, we have to beat up Nomura for the first time, but definitely not the last. Then we meet a space dog and feed it a sandwich, because why not? He's such a good boy. Then we meet another good boy with some amazing hair that probably could do with some therapy, to be honest. Then we meet Penny, who, I'm gonna be honest, isn't that interesting, but I do want to steal her backpack. We're then introduced to the rest of our classmates, and because they're all a bit weird, I decide I don't want to ever go back to this school again. With that all out the way, we make it to our first gym. And because I chose Susan the Fuecoco, this isn't even a challenge. Susan is able to roast this bug-type gym leader and cleanly one-shot every single one of her Pokemon, securing us our first gym badge of the run. Now that we've defeated our first boss, we're able to get our first boss Pokemon. Our fate lies with the wheel at this point, so let's see who we're getting. And the wheel decides on Tarountula. Tarountula is an interesting choice because she should be pretty useful against the next gym, but it does mean I'm slightly worried about some upcoming rock Pokemon that I see in my future. At least Google Plus seems excited to be here, if nothing else. As our next challenge is Cloth the Rock Titan, I decide to do some preparation to make sure my bug doesn't get squished. I decide to buy a Miracle Seed and then go and find the TM for Bullet Seed. This should give me a fighting chance against the giant rock crab. While Cloth would be slightly scary for my ball of string, luckily the AI for this overgrown crab is the same as a wild Pokemon, meaning that instead of going for super effective moves that would guarantee my loss, it will actually just go for a random move. Just have to get lucky with Bullet Seeds. The first fight does get pretty close, but again, this Cloth is using random moves, so I'm just able to pull off a win. We then get into our second fight, and this time we've got Arvin with us, so this fight is slightly easier, and the giant crab goes down to some more Bullet Seeds. That's the first Titan taken down with no issues, and obviously I can't randomize which Pokemon I'm getting here because, well, there was only one Pokemon, so we're adding the giant rock crab to our party. Welcome aboard, Google Buzz. I hope you wake up before the next gym. Speaking of which, our second gym fight is just around the corner. Just gotta get past this gym puzzle. Once we've escaped the onslaught of Sunfloras though, we're ready for our second gym badge. I do have an important decision to make first though. The last time I attempted a challenge like this in Generation 5, go check out that video, I decided that I wasn't able to evolve any of my Pokemon. However, looking at this game, if I did that, I probably wouldn't make it very far. That means I decide to allow Google Plus to evolve into Spidops. With Google Plus evolved, it's time for our second gym fight. So Braxis starts with Petalil and I start with Google Plus. Thankfully, now that Google Plus has evolved, a single bug bite is enough to take out the Petalil, and then a second bug bite is able to take out the Smoliv. Last, the Braxis is Sudowoodo, and this thing is an issue, and the main reason I decided to let Google Plus evolve. I decide to start with a Silk Trap to lower Sudowoodo's speed to hopefully guarantee that it keeps going for Trail Blaze, as the AI doesn't like being slower than you. I then start going for Bug Bites that do decent damage, as Sudowoodo goes through a second Trail Blaze that luckily doesn't do too much. A second Bug Bite brings Sudowoodo very close to being KO'd, and luckily, in response, Sudowoodo goes through a third Trail Blaze. However, now Sudowoodo's speed has now been raised enough where it does outspeed on the next turn and land a really strong Rock Tomb that leaves Google Plus on 1 HP, but luckily she survives and gets off a third Bug Bite for the KO, winning us our second gym badge. That was incredibly close, but Google Plus survived, winning us our second gym badge. With Braxis defeated, we're in the hands of the wheel again, and this time we've got the option of Petalil, Sudowoodo and Smoliv. and all of these Pokemon are actually pretty decent. So let's see who we're getting. And the wheel decides on Smoliv. When Google Author evolves, he'll actually become a pretty useful tank, so I'm excited to add him to our party. He's also so small and tiny, how could I not immediately be in love? We're then ready to take on our second Titan fight, and this time it's Bombardier, the Open Sky Titan. And to be honest, Google Buzz makes this fight a complete cakewalk. He's able to completely demolish this overgrown bird with a couple rock throws. Nice and easy. Defeating the Sky Titan means we can add our own Bombardier, Google Wave, to our party. With the Sky Titan defeated, we're able to head off to our next challenge, the first of the Team Star Bosses. Now the Team Star Bosses are some of the hardest challenges in the game, so Giacomo is definitely going to be the toughest fight so far. Luckily, my party is a bit more filled out at this point, so fingers crossed this goes well. Giacomo starts with Pawniard and I start with Google Buzz. I'm immediately able to outspeed and do good damage with a Rock Smash that lowers Pawniard's defense. Unfortunately though, this activates Pawniard's ability Defiant, giving it an attack boost, meaning the Metal Claw that Google Buzz has to take does a lot of damage. Luckily on the next turn, a second Rock Smash is enough for the KO, but Google Buzz has taken a lot more damage than I was hoping for. Giacomo then sends out his Retharoom, and this thing is terrifying. It has really high stats to this point in the game, and you can't inflict any status conditions on it, so I'm just going to have to hope that I can brute force it. I decide to immediately switch Google Buzz out into Google Plus, who has to take a Snarl on the switch, that luckily doesn't do too much. Google Plus then has to take a nasty strong Wicked Talk before getting off a super effective Bug Bite that does a decent amount. A second Wicked Talk does a huge amount, and Joy-Con Drift means that instead of getting off another strong Bug Bite, I actually go through an Insurance that doesn't do much at all. With Google Plus so low, I decide to switch her out for Google Author, who takes a Swift that crits on the switch. Google Author then has to take a Wicked Talk that puts him down to 1 HP. Jesus, that needs to stop happening. Luckily, Google Author survives and is able to lower the giant Starmobile's attack with a Charm. I then decide to switch into Google Wave, who takes a Swift that thanks to the Charm doesn't do too much. Luckily, on the next turn, the Starmobile goes for a Metal Sound, allowing Google Wave to get off a strong Pluck. Google Wave then has to take a second Swift before getting off another strong Pluck, before I decide to switch him out for Google Buzz. On the switch, Google Buzz takes a Swift that luckily doesn't do too much. I then switch Google Buzz out for Google Wave again, who takes a Snarl on the switch. Now that Google Wave has shaken off the special defense drop, I'm hoping that he can survive long enough to get off a couple more Plucks, as the Starmobile will hopefully go for Metal Sound again. Of course, instead, the Starmobile immediately goes for a Swift that crits again. Are you kidding? Luckily, Google Wave survives and is able to get off another Pluck that does good damage. I'm now in an awkward position though, where Google Wave could go down to another crit, but I don't really have anyone else I can switch into, so I decide to stay in and try and get off some more damage. Luckily, the Starmobile then misses a Metal Sound, and Google Wave lands another Pluck that very nearly KOs the giant truck. Google Wave then has to take one more Swift, but he luckily survives on 3 HP before bringing down the Starmobile with another Pluck. That was a bit too close, and we did get crit twice, but luckily we made it through with no deaths, and my team was able to take down the first Team Star Boss. Now, obviously, I get a boss Pokemon again, and I've decided that I'm not going to be counting the Starmobiles as a possible encounter because they're kind of broken, so instead, I'm just giving myself a Pawniard. So Google Glass joins the team, and before we know it, we're at the third gym leader, Iona, and Iona is actually really scary, and to make matters worse, Google Plus actually over-levels before I'm able to reach Iona, meaning I'm a Pokemon down, making this tough fight even harder. Let's go see if we've got what it takes to win our third gym badge. So I decide to start with Google Buzz, while Iona starts with Wattrel. Luckily, Google Buzz outspeeds and able to land a Rock Blast that KOs the stupid Seabird. Second is Bellybot, and this thing is kinda tanky, so I decide to immediately switch out into Google Author. As I switch, Bellybot goes for a Water Gun. I then have to take a strong Spark that annoyingly paralyzes, but luckily Google Author breaks through and gets off her Charm. It's a very drawn out fight, but thanks to Mega Drain and charms, I'm able to keep Google Offers healthy enough to bring the belly bot into the red. Unfortunately, Google Offers takes a lot of damage and isn't able to finish off the overgrown toad. This means I need to switch out into Google Glass to get the KO. On the switch, I have to take a powered up water gun before going through a dig that gets the KO on the belly bot. Third for Iona is her Luxio, which immediately lowers my attack with an Intimidate before giving me a +2 attack boost thanks to Defiant. Google Glass is then in a perfect position to KO with a dig. Unfortunately, Google Glass does have to take a spark and then of course gets paralyzed. Luckily, he's able to break through the paralysis and get the KO with a single dig. Last for Iona is her Miss Magius, and this thing is terrifying. I'm hoping, however, that Google Glass can survive one hit and then hit back with a really strong boosted dig. Unfortunately though, Miss Magius immediately goes through a Hex, which is already boosted by the paralysis, and of course, it crits and gets the one shot on Google Glass. Rest in peace, buddy. You weren't around very long, but you were still a vital member of this fight, and I'll never forget you. With Google Glass down, I'm in a really awkward spot. I decide my best bet is Google Buzz, who is still on full HP, so I send him in, hoping that he's able to get off some damage. Of course, I'm immediately then confused, but luckily Google Buzz breaks through the confusion and then lands a Rock Blast that hits 3 times, bringing the Miss Magius to below 50% HP. Miss Magius then lands a Hex that does a decent amount of damage, and then I pray that I'm able to get off another Rock Blast. Luckily, Google Buzz breaks through the confusion and starts landing Rock Blasts. I need at least 3 here to get the KO, and I've won 1, 2, 3. God, I love this cow crab. With Miss Magius down, I've defeated Iona, and we've won ourselves our 3rd gym badge of the run. As a reward for beating Iona, you should all know what happens next. We get our next Pokemon, and there's a few good options here. Wattrel is really strong, a Luxray obviously is pretty good, especially with Intimidate, Bellybot is probably the weakest of the 4, and Miss Magius is an amazing encounter, so fingers crossed we get something good. And we land on Luxio. Again, Luxio with Intimidate is actually really strong, but unfortunately Google Inbox has Rivalry instead, which is an awful ability. Oh well, I'm sure he'll still be useful, and he's a good little kitty taking a nap, so I can't really stay mad. It's then a quick trip to fight our next Team Star boss. But first, of course, we've got to play this stupid minigame. Although I mentioned how much I hate it, it takes forever and it literally just requires you running around and pressing the R button. Like, has anybody ever actually lost this? And even if you have, has anybody actually ever ran out of time? Like 10 minutes seems like a ridiculous amount of time for how easy these battles are. Like, I know it's a kid's game, but like, could we not have this be slightly more interesting? Oh well. Eventually we get the minigame done, meaning it's time to challenge Melia of Team Star. And Melia is the fire type trainer. Luckily, I have access to the Rain Dance TM, so this shouldn't be too difficult. Melia starts with Torkoal, and I start with Google Wave. I immediately start by going through a Rain Dance, or trying to go through a Rain Dance I should say, because of course, Joy-Con drift means that I accidentally click Rock Throw instead of Rain Dance. This means Google Wave takes a huge amount of damage from a Flame Wheel, and of course, gets burnt. Great, such a good start. Luckily, on the next turn, I click the correct attack and get off a Rain Dance, meaning that I've essentially neutered the scariest parts of this fight. I then decide to go through a Foul Play that does a decent amount as Torkoal goes through a Clear Smog that brings Google Wave really close to being KO'd. With Google Wave so hurt, I decide to switch out into Google Buzz, who is able to KO the Torkoal with a single Rock Blast. Then it's time to deal with the Starmobile, and this thing is kind of scary. Luckily with the rain setup, I should be in a good position to win this. So the Weather Room immediately starts by going through a Screech to lower Google Buzz's defense, and then Google Buzz is able to land another Rock Blast that hits 5 times, doing nearly 50% in one attack. God, I love this crab cow. I then decide to switch into Google Inbox, who takes a Blazing Torque on the switch, but luckily doesn't do too much because of the rain. Of course, then the rain ends, so I switch back into Google Buzz. The Starmobile then goes through an overheat that thankfully doesn't do too much even with the rain ended. Google Buzz then takes another Screech before going through another Rain Dance. With the rain back up, I'm free to switch into Google Inbox again to remove the defense drop before then switching back into Google Buzz. On the switch, Google Buzz takes another Blazing Torque, but luckily doesn't get burnt. Unfortunately though, before he's able to get off another Rock Blast, he does get burnt by a second Blazing Torque. But luckily, Google Buzz is able to pull through and eventually, very slowly, KO the Starmobile for another victory. That wasn't too bad thanks to the rain and Google Buzz being ridiculous with his Rock Blast luck. That's another boss taken down, meaning we get another Pokemon, and this time we're getting Torkoal. Google Nexus is an excellent tanky fire type that should be able to hit really hard, so I'm excited to add him to the team. Google Nexus couldn't have come at a better time either, because the next Titan is Orthworm, the Steel type, and of course my Fire Turtle makes quick work of this, completely destroying it in what is probably one of the easiest boss fights I've ever done in a Pokemon game. And despite being so easy, defeating this Titan gives me my own giant worm, meaning I've now got access to Google Aloe, probably one of the best Pokemon in the game. Pure Steel is an excellent typing, and thanks to his ability, he's not only completely immune to ground type attacks, he's actually healed by them. So my giant wormy boy will be an excellent addition to the team going forward. Now, before we get to the next gym, I've got some important preparation to do, and that involves getting a new hat. Look how good I look. And I mean, that's actually it. It's time for our next gym fight, and this one shouldn't be too difficult, so let's jump right in. Kofu starts with the loser, and I start with Google Inbox, who has evolved into the intimidating Luxray. Not that intimidating because he doesn't have Intimidate, but you get the point. Kofu immediately starts with an Aqua Cutter that crits and does huge damage, but luckily my Lion is able to hit back with a Thunderfang that one-shots the stupid fish. Second is Wugtrio, so I switch into Google Offer. On the switch, Google Offer has to take a headbutt that also crits. Are you kidding me? Luckily, he survives, meaning that after taking another headbutt, he's able to KO the stupid Wugtrio with a critical hit Mega Drain of his own. Last, the Kofu is his ugly looking crab, so I immediately switch into Google Plus. On the switch, Google Plus has to take a Rock Smash that luckily does next to nothing. I then go through a Silk Trap to lower this ugly crab's speed, before going through a Bug Bite that does next to nothing. The ugly looking crab then goes through a Crab Hammer that does massive damage. I decide I better switch into Google Offer and finish this thing off quickly, but of course on the switch, another Crab Hammer from Google Offer does huge damage. Luckily I'm now baiting a Rock Smash that shouldn't do too much, so I switch back into Google Inbox. Unfortunately, on the switch my prediction is wrong. Because Google Offer was so low, Kofu saw the KO with any of his attacking moves, and unfortunately, on the switch, Google Inbox takes a Crab Hammer that KOs my Spiky Lion. Rest in peace, buddy. I would have liked to have used you more, but unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be. With my Electric Lion down, I'm slightly put out at losing a Pokemon to this ugly crab, but thankfully I'm able to send in Google Wave, who is able to KO this stupid looking crab with 2 foul plays while only taking a strong Crab Hammer. That's the 4th gym taken down. We did unfortunately lose a member of our team, but we did also take 2 crits, so you know, our luck wasn't exactly on our side during that. 4th gym badge acquired. With Kofu down, it is time to get another Pokemon, and this time we've got a chance to get a crab, a fish, or a weird worm looking thing. So let's see who we're getting. And it turns out we're getting Wugtrio. Now, I don't know much about Wugtrio to be honest, but looking at its stats, it looks like it hits pretty hard and moves pretty fast. It looks like it will go down if it's hit by a small child. So this should be an interesting Pokemon to try and keep alive. Welcome to the team, Google Tango. With Google Tango added to our party, it's time to take on our 3rd Team Star boss. And this one should be slightly easier than the last 2, mostly thanks to Google Aloe. So I start with Google Aloe, while Atticus starts with his Stunk Tank. Stunk Tank is immediately able to get off a Sucker Punch that doesn't do too much, and then Google Aloe is able to get off a dig that does good damage into the overgrown skunk. Another 2 digs are then enough for the KO, and Google Aloe only has to take 1 more Sucker Punch. Second for Atticus is his Weatheroom, not the Starmobile Weatheroom, just a normal Weatheroom. Why he's got 2, I have no idea, but it immediately starts by going through a Bulldoze that actually heals my wormy boy. A single dig is then enough to do more than 50%, meaning on the next turn, a Bulldoze is enough for the KO. Third for Atticus is Muck, and this thing can't even hit Google Aloe, like, at all, so I immediately start spamming Spikes. Spamming Spikes means that I can run this Muck out of PP for Sludge Wave, meaning that it has no choice but to attack me with ground type moves, meaning that Google Aloe is able to be fully healed by Mud Slaps. Eventually, with Google Aloe at full HP, I'm safe to take down the Muck with a combination of Bulldozers and Dig. That just leaves the Weatheroom, and I'm in a pretty good position here to take it down. Usually, my worm would be threatened by Flame Charge, but because it took so long to KO the Muck, it actually starts raining. This is great, as it means my worm is able to take a Flame Charge with minimal damage and then get off a dig that does a huge amount. Eventually, Alo is able to bring the Starmobile to about a third of its HP, but he does nearly get KO'd in the process, meaning I'm gonna need someone else to finish off this overgrown car. So I decide to switch into Google Nexus, who takes a spin out on the switch and a noxious talk on the following turn before just missing the KO with a lava plume. I then decide to send in Google Tango, who takes a noxious talk on the switch. Now it's a case of outspeeding and then KOing the Starmobile. Oh, or not. I actually completely missed the fact that the Starmobile was raising its speed, meaning that unfortunately Google Tango is outsped and KO'd with the second noxious talk. Oopsie, easy come, easy go I guess. Luckily I'm then able to send in Google Wave, who is able to finish off the overly large truck with a single foul play. Made a slight misplay at the end there that cost me Wog Trio, but we still managed to pull off a win. And of course, another victory means another Pokemon. And I know you're looking at this wheel thinking, well hang on a second, didn't you say you weren't counting the Starmobiles as an eligible encounter? And yes, that is true. However, for some strange reason, Atticus has a Weatheroom and a separate Starmobile, so technically I'm not adding the Starmobile as an eligible encounter, I'm adding his other car Pokemon. So let's see who we're gonna get. And it lands on Stuntank. Stuntank is interesting, as it's not great, but it's also not terrible, so I'll probably find some niche use somewhere. Maybe stealing some perfect apples. Welcome to the team, Google Video. With another Pokemon acquired, it's time for everybody's favourite gym leader, Larry. So let's jump in and see how this goes. Larry starts off with Komala, and I start off with Google Alo. Luckily, Alo walls the sleepy koala pretty handily and is able to take him down with a couple of Iron Heads. Second for Larry is Dunsparce, everybody's favourite joke Pokemon. Luckily, Google Ally is still able to wall this thing pretty hard, so I start with an Iron Head that gets the flinch. A second Iron Head brings the stupid Dunsparce to just above 50% before it lands a glare that paralyzes. A Hyper Drill from the Dunsparce then does next to no damage, and another Iron Head brings it into range of being KO'd. Dunsparce then goes through a Drill Run, which of course does nothing but heal my worthy boy before he's able to get off another Iron Head that just misses the KO. I then decide to switch into Google Wave, who takes a hard Hyper Drill on the switch. Luckily, Google Wave is then able to hit back with a Pluck and take down the Dunsparce. Last for Larry is his ace Staraptor, and this thing is kind of terrifying, but luckily it doesn't know close combat. As the Staraptor comes out, it gets off an Intimidate, so I decide to switch in to Google Buzz, who takes a Facade that luckily is resisted and doesn't do too much. On the following turn, a second Facade brings Google Buzz to just above 50% HP before Google Buzz hits back with a Rock Blast that unfortunately only hits twice. A third Facade then brings Google Buzz really low before a second Rock Blast only lands 2 more times, meaning the Staraptor is still above 50% HP. Google Buzz then has to take another Facade that brings him down into the red, but luckily he survives and is able to get off another Rock Blast that this time hits 3 times, but still, unfortunately, misses the KO. With Staraptor so low, I'm able to switch into Google Nexus, who takes a Facade on the switch, but doesn't do too much because Google Nexus has a really high defensive stat. A second Facade on the following turn brings Google Nexus really low, but luckily he survives and a Lava Plume takes down the overgrown bird. That's Larry and his normal types taken down, meaning we've won our 5th gym badge. With Larry taken down, it's time for another Pokemon, and obviously I'm really hoping for Staraptor here, but Dunsparce wouldn't be terrible either, as long as I don't get the Sleepy Koala, and I actually get lucky as I get the Dunsparce, who I name Google Health. Dunsparce is actually a pretty strong normal type, so he should be a welcome addition to the team. Nomura then ambushes me outside of the gym, but it's another easy fight, but I think she may have poisoned me because I start acting very strange after I've defeated her. Like, am I okay? I think I'm dying. Anyway, moving on from that, and with our new companion Google Health added to our party, it's time for the next gym, and this one's a double battle. Because this fight is a double battle, and Rhyme being a ghost type leader, this fight is actually fairly tricky compared to a lot of the gym fights in this game. So let's see how this goes. I start with Google Wave and Google Buzz, and Rhyme starts with Mimikyu and Bayonetta. Mimikyu starts by going for a slash into Google Wave that luckily doesn't do too much, and then Google Buzz is able to hit the Bayonetta for good damage with a Rock Slide and break the Mimikyu's disguise. A foul play from Google Wave is then able to finish off the Bayonetta. Rhyme sends out her Houndstone, and then I get a stat boost, I assume for getting a KO. I don't actually know how the stat boosts work in this fight. I probably should look it up at some point point, but I'm not going to complain about an attack boost. On the following turn, I decide to protect with Google Wave as Mimikyu lands a Shadow Sneak into Google Buzz that does minimal damage. Another Rock Slide then does good damage into Mimikyu and Houndstone goes through a Play Rough into Google Wave's Protect. Then, scarily, Rhyme's team gets a speed boost. Again, really not sure how these boosts work. I decide to switch Google Wave out for Google Alo, who takes a Slash and a Play Rough on the switch. Google Buzz is then able to get off another Rock Slide that KOs the Mimikyu and brings the Houndstone really low. Rhyme then sends out her ace Toxtricity as my side of the field gets another attack boost, meaning Google Buzz is at +2 attack. Houndstone then goes for a Phantom Force, which means none of my moves hit this turn, but Google Buzz is still able to get off a Rock Slide into the Toxtricity that does a huge amount and gets the flinch. That's huge because then Google Alo is able to very nearly KO the Toxtricity with an Iron Head. Rhyme's team then gets an Omni boost, however at this point it's all over as I can switch Google Alo out for Google Author, who is immune to the Phantom Force from Houndstone. Google Buzz then has to take a Hex from the Toxtricity that does a huge amount, but luckily he survives, meaning a Rock Slide is able to KO the Toxtricity. Unfortunately, Rock Slide does miss the Houndstone, meaning that this fight isn't quite over, but on the following turn, it's a simple case of protecting with Google Buzz and trying to get an energy ball off. Of course, Houndstone goes through another Phantom Force. Luckily, I can just switch Google Buzz out for Google Video, who takes the Phantom Force with no issues, and then my overly large Olive Plant is able to KO the Houndstone with a single energy ball. Not too bad. That fight could have gotten scary, especially with all the stat boosts going around, but overall, that wasn't too bad. That's the 6th gym leader taken down. It's then time for another Pokemon. All of these Pokemon are actually pretty good. I'm just really hoping I don't get the Bayonetta, so let's see who I'm getting. And for once, I actually get a gym leader's ace in Toxtricity. Toxtricity is a really strong special attacker. I've just got to make sure he stays away from ground types. Welcome aboard, Google Lively. It's then time for another easy Titan fight that proves to be no issues thanks to my Flaming Turtle. This means, of course, that I get my own Paradox Pokemon, which is extremely broken. Oh wait, mine seems to be a bit different. It's almost like giving myself a Paradox Pokemon would have been too strong, so I decided to give myself a Donphan instead. Oh well, not complaining. Donphan is also really strong in his own right, so Google Talk is another really strong Pokemon to add to my roster. With another Pokemon acquired, it's time for our 7th gym fight, and of course that means more stupid minigames. God, no gym leader is worth this. I mean, what is this? I mean, who came up with such a oh my god. Oh my. Okay, if you want me to do Star Jumps, please step on me. I mean, sorry, yes, gym fight time. Tulip is a Psychic type trainer, but luckily she doesn't have too much coverage, so this shouldn't be too bad. I decide to start with Google Wave, while Tulip starts with Theratherig. I immediately get off a Foul Play that does a huge amount, while the stupid Giraffe hits back with a weak Crunch. A second Foul Play is then enough for the KO. Second for Tulip is Gardevoir, who threatens with Fairy type moves, so I decide to switch into Google Alo. On the switch, Google Alo actually takes a lot from a Dazzling Gleam, and then on the following turn, a Psychic brings him really low. Luckily, an Iron Head is very nearly able to KO the Gardevoir, so it's a simple case of switching back into Google Wave on a Psychic and then KOing with a Foul Play. Third for Tulip is Espira, and this thing really can't do much to Google Wave, so it's a simple case of staying in, taking a Shadow Ball that does basically nothing, hitting back with a Foul Play that very nearly KOs, taking a second Shadow Ball, and then KOing with another Foul Play. That just leaves Tulip's last Pokemon, Florges, and this thing is kind of scary, especially because I immediately make a misplay and send out Google Lively, who has to take a Moonblast on the switch. For some strange reason, in my head, Tulip at this point was a Fairy type trainer and had terrestrialized her overgrown plant into a Fairy type. Of course, it's actually decided to terror itself into a Psychic type, meaning that switching into Toxtricity was definitely a mistake. Because of this, I decide to switch into Google Wave on another Psychic, before then switching into Google Nexus. On the switch, Google Nexus has to take a Moonblast, but luckily doesn't do that much. On the following turn, however, a Psychic brings Google Nexus really low. Luckily though, my Flaming Turtle survives and is able to get off a Flame Wheel that actually does next to nothing. This is actually looking quite bad, so I send in my ever-reliable crab, Google Buzz. On the switch, Google Buzz takes a Psychic that again does a huge amount. Okay, things are going really badly here, and unfortunately, I think that means I have to make a sacrifice. So on the following turn, I decide to stay in and get off an X-Scissor that does a good amount of damage into Tulip's ace, but then, unfortunately, my Cow Crab is hit back with a Moonblast that KOs. Rest in peace, Google Buzz. You were with me from the beginning, and your Rock Blast luck made so many fights so much easier. I'll never forget you. Luckily, with Google Buzz's sacrifice, I'm able to send in Google Talk, who is able to come in and finish off the Florges with an Earthquake after taking a Moonblast. Okay, that got a bit too close there, and we lost a valuable member of our party, but we made it through our 7th gym fight, and to be honest, I'm still simping for this gym leader. So if she wants to KO my Pokemon or make me do star jumps, I'm all for that. Just, yeah, I probably should leave. I am actually taken. That's the 7th gym badge acquired. With another gym badge acquired, we're getting another Pokemon, and I'll be completely honest, all of these are actually pretty good, so let's see who we're getting. We get our own oversized ostrich, who I name Google Reed. This psychic bird is pretty decent, and you can't ever go too wrong with a strong psychic type, so welcome to the team. And before I know it, we're actually at our last gym, so let's jump right in. Grusha starts with Frostmoth, and I start with Google Wave. Frostmoth would be pretty threatening to my bird, but luckily Google Wave is able to outspeed and KO with a single pluck. Second for Grusha is Beartick, so I switch immediately into Google Alo, who takes an Icicle Crash on the switch. An Aqua Jet then does next to nothing. Google Alo is then able to take out the Icy Bear with 2 Iron Heads while taking some weak Aqua Jets. Then Sir Titan comes out, and if you've seen this thing in the anime, it's terrifying. Luckily, Google Alo is able to wall it pretty hard, so after 2 Iron Heads, Google Alo is able to bring it into the red before I switch into Google Video, who takes a liquidation and then KOs with a Sucker Punch. Last for Grusha is Altaria. This thing is actually pretty tanky, so I immediately start by going through a Night Slash that doesn't do too much, and then Google Video has to take a really hard Hurricane. On the next turn, I decide to switch into Google Lively, who is able to take the Hurricane a lot better than Google Video did. On the following turn, Google Lively has to take an Ice Beam that hits really hard, but luckily my Electric type survives and is able to get off a Boom Burst that does good damage. A second Ice Beam then brings Google Lively really low, but luckily he survives on 4 HP and is able to bring the Altaria into the red with a second Boom Burst. It's then a simple case of switching into Google Nexus, who dodges a Hurricane before ending this fight with a Flame Wheel. I could have been a bit more dicey there had I got more unlucky with confusions from the Hurricanes, as that Altaria was actually quite threatening, but we made it through with no casualties, meaning we've won our last gym fight. We're entering the end game now. We've only got 2 more Team Star bases to do before we arrive at the Pokemon League, but before that, we've got to see which Pokemon we're getting. All of Grusha's Pokemon are kind of mid, apart from Sir Titan, so maybe we'll get lucky, and unfortunately I don't, and instead I get an Altaria, who isn't awful, but probably won't have much use outside of one particular fight. With that out the way, we're ready to head to our 4th Team Star boss, this time against Ortuga, the Fairy-type trainer. Luckily, I've got a lot of counters for Fairy-type Pokemon, so this shouldn't be too hard. Ortuga immediately starts with Azumarill, and I start with Google Lively, who is able to do good damage with an Overdrive as the Azumarill, who just goes for a Charm. A second Overdrive is then enough for the KO. Second is Wigglytuff, so I immediately switch into Google Health, who takes a weak Body Slam on the switch. Of course, it also paralyzes, because of course it would. Luckily, on the next turn, after taking a Play Rough, Google Health is able to land a Yawn, meaning that I just have to stall for a turn before this pink ball of fluff falls asleep. So I decide to heal with a Roost after taking a second Play Rough as the Wigglytuff falls asleep. I'm then perfectly safe to switch into Google Video as Wigglytuff naps, before landing a Gunk Shot that cleanly one-shots the Wigglytuff. Third is Dash Bun, and I'm pretty safe here to stay in and keep going for Gunk Shots, so after taking a Play Rough, I go through a Gunk Shot that unfortunately misses. This means Google Video has to take a second Play Rough, but luckily a Gunk Shot then connects and very nearly KOs the Dash Bun. A priority Sucker Punch is then enough to finish off the Toasty Dog. Last for Ortuga is his Starmobile. I immediately switch out into Google Alo. On the switch, the Starmobile goes for a Steamroller that does nothing, apart from remove the terrain that it just set up. I'm not sure what the point of it setting up terrain is if it's immediately going to remove it. Google Alo then has to take a Magical Talk, which doesn't do too much, but annoyingly, it does get the Confusion. Luckily, Google Alo breaks through the Confusion and lands a strong Iron Head. I then decide to switch into Google Nexus to get rid of the Confusion, but of course, Google Nexus then gets hit by a Confuse Ray and hurts himself in Confusion. Luckily, the Starmobile can't really do too much to Google Nexus or Google Alo, so it's just a case of switching between the two to remove the confusions that keep happening, and eventually I'm able to wear down the Starmobile with Iron Heads and Flamethrowers, and eventually, after many attacks, it does go down, winning us our second to last Team Star boss. With another boss taken down, it's time for another Pokemon, and an Azumarill with huge power, or the Hot Cross Bun Dog, would be really strong here, as long as I don't get the stupid "oh, you're kidding." I really didn't want Wigglytuff, but as I stare into those large, innocent eyes, I can't help but think maybe I judged too harshly. Nah, f that. Bye Wigglytuff. With the trash taken out, it's time for the last Team Star boss, Erie, the fighting type trainer, and this is by far the most difficult Team Star boss, so fingers fingers crossed this goes well. Eerie starts with Toxicroak, and I start with Google Read. Google Read immediately has to take a strong Sucker Punch, but Google Read is able to hit back with a 4 times effective Psychic that gets the one-shot. Second for Eerie is Lucario, so I decide to immediately switch out into Google Nexus. On the switch, Google Nexus has to take a strong Dark Pulse, and then is outsped on the following turn and has to take an Aura Sphere that does a huge amount, but Google Nexus takes the hit and then one-shots the Lucario with a sun-boosted Flamethrower. Third for Eerie is the Psychic Monkey looking thing that I can't even begin to pronounce, so I switch into Google Lively, who takes a resisted Close Combat. A second resisted Close Combat brings Google Lively really low, but thanks to the 2 special defense drops, a single Boom Burst is enough for the KO. Fourth for Eerie is the terrifying Annihilate, so I immediately switch into Google Wave, who takes a Fire Punch on the switch that does a decent amount thanks to the sun being up. On the following turn, Google Wave is outsped and hit by a Close Combat and is taken down to 1 HP, only surviving thanks to friendship mechanics. I don't really like those mechanics, it seems like counterintuitive to have them activated in a challenge run, but they are what they are, so Google Wave survives and gets off a foul play that does a huge amount. I've decided though that my big bird should have gone down last turn, so it makes sense to let him go down on the following turn. So I stay in and salute as Google Wave takes another Close Combat and again survives on 1 HP, so another foul play gets through and KOs the Annihilate. Ridiculous. Last for Eerie is the last Starmobile, and my team is looking pretty beat up at this point, and I'm still gonna let Google Wave go down because he really should have died, so I stay in and watch as Google Wave is taken down by a Combat Talk. Rest in peace my big bird. With Google Wave down, I immediately switch into Google Bump, who should be able to do some good damage into the Starmobile. On the following turn, my Cloud Dragon is immediately outsped and hit by a spin out, and then I go for a Perish Song. I'm not sure if Perish Song will work on the big truck, but I'm hoping it might. Unfortunately it doesn't, meaning I've just wasted a turn. Google Bump is still healthy though, so I stay in and get off a strong Moonblast before taking a spin out that of course crits. I've been crit so many times this game. Unfortunately, I really don't have much of the choice but to stay in and get off another Moonblast and watch as this Starmobile gets another KO. Or not. Instead, it goes to the Gear Shift, raising its stats, but meaning Google Bump can survive another turn and get off another strong Moonblast before finally being taken down by a spin out. Rest in peace Google Bump, you probably survived longer than you should have there, and your fluff will be remembered. The Starmobile's pretty low at this point, but my team is very beat up, so I decide to send in Google Read, who does massive damage with a Psychic, just missing the KO on the Starmobile. And much to my surprise, the Starmobile just goes for another Shift Gear in response. This is perfect because it activates Google Read's Opportunist, keeping Google Read faster than the truck, meaning on the following turn, I outspeed and KO with another Psychic. That fight was a tough one. We lost 2 fellow team members, but we made it through our last Team Star Boss. With the last Team Star Boss defeated, we get another Pokemon, and this time it's a 50-50 split on an excellent Pokemon or a kind of mid Pokemon. So let's see who we're getting, and it lands on Toxicroak. I can't think of much use to Toxicroak at this point, but I can't complain about another semi-decent encounter. So welcome aboard Google Stadia. With Google Stadia added to our roster, we've got one last thing to do before the Elite Four, and that's defeat another easy Titan fight. This one is slightly more difficult than the others, I suppose because it is the last one, but Dondozo really isn't that much of an issue. So eventually we take out the Titan, which means we've got a chance here to either get an amazing Dondozo or a semi-mid Tatsugiri. So let's see who we're getting. And we land on the catfish, whale thing, Dondozo. Dondozo is obviously a monster, so I'm very happy to have him as my last encounter. Welcome to the party, Google Trips. Speaking of which, it's time for the Elite Four, so let's see who we're bringing. Google Health, the Dunsparce. Google Alo, the Orthworm. Google Nexus, the Torkoal. Google Offer, the Abrolith. Google Trips, the Dondozo. Google Video, the Stunk Tank. Let's go see if my band of misfits has what it takes to defeat the Elite Four and champion. First up for this Elite Four is Riker, the ground type trainer, who immediately starts with a Wish Cash, while I start with Google Offer. Google Offer does have to take a strong Blizzard, but is immediately able to hit back with an energy ball that one-shots the strange looking catfish. Second is Camerupt, who is obviously a big threat to my olive plant, so I immediately switch out into Google Trips. On the switch, Google Trips takes a Yawn, but luckily that doesn't take effect through a turn, so after taking an Earth Power that does a decent amount, a single Waterfall is enough to KO the Camerupt. Google Trips then decides to nap as Donphan gets sent out. Donphan immediately goes for a Stone Edge that doesn't do too much as my big catfish continues to nap. On the following turn, after taking a strong Earthquake, Google Trips wakes up and lands a strong Waterfall that brings the Donphan to 50%. Google Trips then has to take another Earthquake that is able to KO with a second Waterfall. Next, the Rika is Dugtrio, who isn't too much of the threat, so after setting up a Sandstorm, is able to be completely one-shot by another Waterfall. Google Trips is ripping this team apart. However, last the Rika is the Cloyster, and this thing probably would actually KO Google Trips as he's so low, so I decide to immediately switch into Google Alo. The funny thing is, Google Alo is actually completely immune to this thing's attack, so after a number of Iron Heads, it goes down with no issues. That's the first member of the Elite Four taken down with no issues at all. Second to this Elite Four is the small child Poppy. Why they've led a small child into the Elite Four, I have no idea. So Poppy starts with Copperage, while I start with Google Alo. Google Alo walls this thing pretty handily, so after a number of Earthquakes, the giant elephant goes down. Second, the Poppy is Bronzong, so I immediately use a Shed Tail to switch out into Google Nexus. Shed Tail creates a substitute on the switch, meaning that as Google Nexus comes in, he's completely immune to the Iron Head, and then the Earthquake that Bronzong goes through on the following turn. This is perfect as it allows Google Nexus to stay pretty much completely healthy before KOing with the Flare Blitz. Third, the Poppy is Corviknight, so I decide to stay in, and after the Corviknight increases its defense with an Iron defense, a single Flamethrower is enough for the KO. God, I love my little turtle boy. Next, the Poppy is Magnezone, who immediately sets up a Light Screen. This means the Flamethrower that Google Nexus gets off still does a lot, but doesn't get the one shot. Magnezone then goes for a Discharge that of course paralyzes on the following turn, but Google Nexus breaks through and gets off the second Flamethrower for another KO. Last the Poppy is Tinkatonk. I immediately switch out into Google Trips as the Tinkatonk goes for a weak Stone Edge. A Gigaton Hammer then does next to nothing, meaning that Google Trips is able to get off a Waterfall that takes about a third of this Ace's HP. Google Trips luckily walls this thing pretty hard, so it's just a case of going through a couple more Waterfalls before getting the KO. Tinkatonk really doesn't have the stats it needs to be threatening. That's the second member of the Elite Four taken down. Goodbye, Poppy. Third to this Elite Four is the fan favourite, Larry. And Larry immediately starts out with the Tropius, and I start with Dunsparce. Dunsparce does have to take a Solar Beam, but he's able to KO the weird plant bird with 2 Ice Spinners. Second for Larry is Staraptor, so I immediately switch into Google Trips. On the switch, Google Trips has to take a close combat, and then on the following turn, after taking a strong Brave Bird, a single Avalanche is enough for the KO. Third for Larry is the Cloud Dragon Altaria, so I stay in and take a Dragon Pulse that doesn't do too much before getting another KO with the second Avalanche. Fourth for Larry is Oricorico, so I immediately switch into Google Health. On the switch, Google Health does have to take a Revelation Dance that does a decent amount, but luckily he takes the hit pretty well, meaning on the following turn, after taking a second hit that does a decent amount, Google Health can get off an Ice Spinner that brings the weird Pom-Pom Bird to 50%. With Google Health so low, I decide to switch into Google Offer, laughably weak Dance on the switch. Google Offer then gets hit by a Tita Dance and becomes confused, and then annoyingly hits himself in confusion. Google Offer then has to take a massive amount from an Air Slash, but luckily he snaps out of the confusion and lands a Leech Seed, meaning that there's no way this bird can kill me at this point because I'm getting healed from the Terrain, Leech Seed and Leftovers for a kind of a disgusting amount. On the following turn I go through a Protect to fully heal my Olive Plant before taking another Air Slash and then KOing with an Energy Ball. Last for Larry is the Flamingo, so I immediately switch out into Google Nexus, who takes a close combat on the switch. Luckily, this lowers the Flamingo's defense, meaning after taking a Brave Bird, a Flamethrower is enough for the KO. That's Larry taken down for the second time. These Elite Four fights are getting harder, but we still made it through with no issues. Last for this Elite Four is Hazel, the Dragon type trainer, and he's by far the most difficult member of this Elite Four. So let's jump right in. Hazel starts with Noivern, and I start with Google Alo. Google Alo immediately takes a Super Fang that does 50% of his HP before landing a Rock Slide that actually doesn't do as much as I'm hoping. On the following turn, Google Alo has to take an Air Slash and of course gets flinched. On the following turn, Google Alo takes a Dragon Pulse that very nearly KOs my Wormy Boy before getting off a Rock Slide that brings this dragon into the red. With Google Alo so low, I have no choice that to switch out into Google Health, he takes a Dragon Pulse on the switch. Then, annoyingly, before Google Health can get the KO, he has to take a Super Fang that does good damage. Luckily, he's able to then finish off the annoying dragon with an Ice Spinner. Second is the Poison Dragon, who can't really touch Google Health, so I immediately go through a Roost to nearly fully restore Health's health. Google Health then has to take a Sludge Bomb, but luckily doesn't do over 50%, meaning I'm 3 to get off a Yawn. The Poison Dragon then lands another strong Sludge Bomb, but at this point I'm 3 to outspeed on the following turn, heal myself with a Roost, and then watch as the Poison Dragon falls asleep. With the Poison Dragon asleep, I'm 3 to start going for Ice Spinners, and after 2 attacks, it goes down. Third is the terrifying dragon Haxorus. Luckily, Google Health is healthy enough to tank a Dragon Claw and then get off another Yawn. With the Haxorus yawned, I decide to switch into Google Trips, who takes a Dragon Claw on the switch before the terrifying dragon monster falls asleep. It's then a case of getting off an Avalanche and a critical hit order up for the KO. Next comes Hazel's ace, Baxcalibur, who immediately comes in and goes for a really strong Glaive Rush. Luckily, Google Trips is able to hit back with an Avalanche that very nearly KOs a stupid looking dragon. Google Video has Sucker Punch, so I immediately switch him in and just pray he can take one attack here, and thankfully he does, surviving on 25 HP, meaning on the following turn I can get off a priority Sucker Punch and end this Elite Four. That fight got a bit too close there at the end, and we very nearly lost someone, but we still made it through, meaning we're at the champion. With the Elite Four taken down, it's champion time, and luckily Geeta isn't the scariest champion in the world, so fingers crossed this goes well. Geeta starts with Espira, and I start with Google Video, and I immediately try to go through a Sucker Punch, but unfortunately the Espira sets up a Reflect. Thankfully though, 2 more Sucker Punch attempts go through, and I'm able to take out the oversized ostrich with no real issues. Second for Geeta is Avalugg, so I immediately go through a Flamethrower that does over 50% before taking an Earthquake that does a huge amount. Thankfully, Google Video survives though, and is able to get off the second Flamethrower through another KO. Third for Geeta is King Gambit, and this thing can be kinda terrifying. Thankfully, it's pretty well walled by Google Alo, so I immediately switch out on an Iron Head. Google Alo then outspeeds and lands an Earthquake that does a decent amount before taking a Cleave that does a good amount in retaliation. Seeing how much Earthquake did, I decide it's best to switch out, so I go through a Shed Tail and immediately switch into Google Nexus as the King Gambit takes down the substitute with another Cleave. Google Nexus then has to take a really hard Stone Edge, but luckily he's tanky enough to survive, meaning a Flamethrower is then able to take down the King Gambit. Fourth for Geeta is the ugly looking fish, the loser, so I immediately switch into Google Offer. On the switch, Google Offer has to take a Liquidation, which basically does no damage, and then on the following turn, after taking a strong Ice Fang, a single Energy Ball is enough to KO the fish. Fifth for Geeta is Go-Goat, so I immediately switch back into Google Nexus. On the switch, the Go-Goat goes for a Bulk Up, which is kind of intimidating actually, especially because on the following turn it goes for a second Bulk Up, meaning this thing is now at +2 attack and probably hits fairly hard. Luckily, Google Nexus is able to do good damage with a Flamethrower, then take a Zen Headbutt that even on +2 doesn't do too much, and then KO with a second Flamethrower. That's it, Geeta is down to our last Pokemon, Glamora, and this thing shouldn't be too scary, so I decide to immediately switch Google Nexus out for Google Trips. On the switch, Google Trips takes an Earth Power that doesn't do too much, and then I'm in a pretty good position to KO this stupid weird looking Space Rock. Unfortunately though, I do miss something. I didn't actually see that my special defense got lowered by that Earth Power, and that means that Google Trips is KO'd on the following turn by a Sludge Wave. Rest in peace, my big floaty whale thing. You completely swept most of this Elite Four, and my mistake got you KO'd. With Google Trips down though, I'm able to send in Google Health, who is able to tank a hit and then get off a Yawn. That means after taking another Terra Blast, Google Health is able to get off a Roost as the Glamora falls asleep. I then have to take a bit of the risk and hope that Glamora stays asleep as I send out Google Offer and start going for Energy Balls, but luckily it does, meaning that after a couple Energy Balls, the weird looking Space Rock goes down. That's the Elite Four and Champion taken down. Unfortunately, we did lose my giant catfish to a stupid mistake, but we made it through with only one casualty, and that means we've pretty much won. Just one last thing to do first though, and that's go take down an AI Professor, because of course, what's a Scarlet and Violet Nuzlocke without spending 2 to 3 hours after you beat the game to go do one more fight? Okay, it is more than one fight. We do have to battle Nomura, Arvin, and Penny, but none of these fights are particularly difficult, meaning that after making our way very slowly into Area 0, we're at the final fight of this run. Let's go finish this. So Churro sends out Iron Moth, and I start with Google Talk. Google Talk is immediately outsped and has to take a fiery dance, but then is able to hit back with an Earthquake that gets the one-shot. Second for Churro is Iron Bundle, so I immediately switch out into Google Alo. On the switch, Google Alo has to take a freeze dry, which doesn't hit too hard. Iron Bundle then gets off a Water Pulse that hits really hard, while Google Alo gets off a Rock Slide that does just slightly less than 50% HP. Then the AI breaks because for some strange reason, Iron Bundle refuses to go through anything other than Snowscape for the rest of its short life. That means Google Alo is freely able to KO. I'm so glad that I spent 2 hours getting to this fight just for the AI to break. Third for Churro is Iron Thorns. So I immediately outspeed and go through a strong Earthquake that very nearly gets the one-shot. Iron Thorns then hits back with his own Earthquake, which of course just heals my worm. A second Earthquake is then enough for another KO. Fourth is Iron Jugulus, who outspeeds and hits a Flamethrower that very nearly KOs my worm. And of course it also gets the burn. This means the Rock Slide that Google Alo gets off does next to nothing, and at this point I decide, as it's the last fight, I should probably let my worm go down here. So I stay in and salute as Google Alo is KO'd by a second Flamethrower. Rest in peace, Google Alo. You were probably the MVP of this run. With Google Alo down, I send in Google Video, who takes an Air Slash before doing good damage with the Play Rough. A second Air Slash brings Google Video into the red, but a second Play Rough is able to KO. Fifth is Iron Hands, which is kind of scary, but luckily it's pretty slow, so it shouldn't be too difficult to take down. I decide to immediately switch into Google Nexus, who takes a Thunder Punch on the switch. Iron Hands then outspeeds and gets off a second Thunder Punch before an Earthquake brings the Iron Hands to just above 50%. Iron Hands then starts going for Drain Punches, which is doing slightly less than the Thunder Punch, but it is healing back some of the damage. Luckily, a second Earthquake brings Iron Hands down to the point where another Earthquake should still get the KO, despite another Drain Punch healing back a lot of the damage. And my assumption is correct, as another Earthquake takes down Iron Hands. That leaves Churro's last Pokemon, Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant is kind of scary and gets an attack boost, but luckily I've got a lot of Pokemon still alive, so after letting Google Nexus go down to a Brick Break, rest in peace my little flaming turtle, I'm able to send in Google Health, who makes short work of the anime looking Pokemon. First, he's able to get off a Yawn after surviving a Brick Break, and then, of course, his way out of being KO'd by a second Brick Break. A Boom Burst then does massive damage, very nearly getting a one-shot before Iron Valiant falls asleep. It's just a case of clicking Boom Burst for a second time, KOing Churro's last Pokemon, and winning our final battle and the run. And what a run that was. That was incredibly fun to do, and I'd definitely be up for doing more boss only / gym leader only Pokemon runs in the future. If you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and subscribe for more content in the future, and if you've got any suggestions for future runs, please let me know. Every time you make a suggestion that I like, it gets added to a very large list that I will get around to at some point. Thank you all so much for watching, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.